Hi, I'm Sam Lentz, and I'm running for Orem City Council. I have somewhat of a unique path to the City Council. I didn't grow up in Orem. My family is not originally from here. And so as I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, I came to BYU, went to California to work, and then my wife and I moved to Orem about 7 years ago now, and we've absolutely loved our experience here. And we kind of globetrotted a little bit. We actually lived over in London for a little while. Before we got married, I spent some time in Kenya doing some volunteer work. And so I think having some of those experiences in different parts of the world has helped me appreciate being able to look at some of the problems we face here in Orem from different perspectives and be able to draw on some of those experiences that I've had. Just as far as my personality goes, I'm a data guy. I love to analyze really complex problems, and that was one of the aspects of serving on the City Council that really appealed to me, and I think I've enjoyed being able to solve problems that maybe other people have been a little afraid to tackle because of maybe some of the political history and things like that. And so I'm kind of in my element or in my zone when I have a chance to analyze the data behind some of these issues. One of the things that I think really helped me as I was first running for City Council was scheduling some time to sit down and interview each of the department directors to understand what are the challenges you're facing, what are some of the opportunities you have ahead. And before I even started forming my own platform of this is kind of my vision for the City of Orem, it helped me understand what challenges they were already facing and some of the opportunities of how we could improve and make things even better. So I think one of the other things that makes me a bit unique, the gray hair might throw people for a little bit of a loop, but I'm quite a bit younger than most of the people on the council, and being roughly one generation younger, I think gives me a different perspective that helps me see problems from a different angle, and I think helps give our problem-solving capabilities a little bit more diversity in the way we approach those issues. So one of the things that I pride myself on and I really try to focus on is being transparent beyond belief. And by that, I mean there are some times where if I was more concerned about my political career, I might kind of hold back and be a little bit more quiet, but I tend to be a little bit more outspoken and direct in my positions on things. But I also try to be very thoughtful in the way I analyze a problem, and I don't necessarily jump to a conclusion until I've looked at the data. I've talked to people that live in a neighborhood if we're talking about a zoning issue and those types of things. And I think being able to have more of an open dialogue with the public, sometimes that's through Facebook, sometimes that's through city meetings and open houses, but I like having that two-way dialogue so that it's more dynamic, and it helps me be more open to new ideas, new opportunities for improvement. And I think as we engage the public in that process, it really makes it more of a collaborative effort instead of just these 7 people in the room making a decision. I think one thing that's helped as well to kind of open up and be more transparent as a group and really as a city is by live streaming our city council meetings and our work sessions. Sometimes people ask me a question, well, what did you guys discuss on this certain issue? And I love being able to just send them a link that it'll take them right to that part of the discussion in a work session where we discuss that issue, and it gives some more, I think, context to different perspectives that we have on the council and some of the concerns and how we address those. One experience actually from 4 years ago when I was campaigning that has stuck with me for quite some time. Somebody had called up and asked for a yard sign, and so I was going by their home to deliver that, and her husband answered the door, and he kind of grilled me with questions for probably about 10 minutes on the doorstep, and I could tell by the way that he was framing those questions that he had a very different perspective and had kind of been reading some of the literature from one of the other candidates. And so I tried to be respectful, and I tried to be understanding, but I was also clear in what my positions were and why I had a difference of opinion on some of those issues. And he went back inside to get his wife, And I was just sitting there on the doorstep for probably close to 4 or 5 minutes, holding my yard sign, wondering, am I just wasting my time here? And so he eventually came out and said, all right, she'll take it. And so I handed the yard sign off. And, fast forward several weeks later, it was shortly after Election Day, and this woman had called me and asked, so how did you do? She hadn't seen the election results yet. And I said, well, I won. I'm going to be on the city council. And she said, oh, my husband is going to be so glad. And it really took me by surprise. And I asked her, and I said, based on our conversation, I wasn't quite sure that we were really connecting on that level. But she said, one of the things that he was really impressed with is the fact that you weren't afraid to be clear that you had a difference of opinion, and you didn't have to be mean or rude about it. But that experience has helped shape the way I approach these conversations, because ultimately when you're representing 100,000 people, you're not always going to be able to agree with every person every time. And I think we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I admit, I have to work on that. There are some times where I too get kind of sucked into the emotion of some of those issues. But I think one of the things that has really stood out to me is how passionate Orem residents are about their neighborhood, about their community, and they, as much as they love it here, they want things to keep getting better. And I think certainly we have common ground on how we can accomplish that. Just a couple other things I'll mention. One of the areas I've been trying to focus on a lot on the City Council is trying to find a solution to utopia. And I think we had a lot of options on the table, and I think there were some really great ways that we could, accelerate the build out and also pay down our debt quicker without raising taxes. But I think where we're at right now, I think is a good way forward. It's not necessarily as ambitious as what I was hoping for, but one of the experiences that stood out to me was I think it was last spring, I did what we called a digital spitball session, where I kind of took over the city's Facebook page for about an hour and just answered rapid fire questions about different aspects of the utopia problem, what we were trying to solve, and also some of the aspects of the solution that we were working on. And I think I'm really grateful to be serving on the City Council in a time when we have access to some of this technology that allows us to do that, where we can't always get the whole city in one room at the same time, but having some of these things that we can experience that no matter, maybe somebody's on vacation in a different part of the country for that matter, but they can still participate in that public dialogue and that public process. So I'm really grateful for this chance I have to work with Orem residents. Many of you know that utopia is the issue that sucked me into local politics and got me to keep coming to city council meetings and eventually decide to run for city council. And I'm really proud of some of the progress we've made on utopia. The city will be built out within 3 to 4 years. We're not going to be adding more city debt. We're not going to be, adding new taxes or fees related to that. It's because the network itself has been so much more successful, and I'm really proud of, not just the work that we've done here, but the Utopia staff, the Utopia boards. I think everybody is starting to see the vision of the benefits of having an open, shared infrastructure that still allows people to choose whatever provider they wish on that network. And so I'm excited to see the road ahead. You also might know that I was hoping that we could do even more on the Utopia front. I was hoping that we could actually be wrapping up the build out by now. But ultimately, I'm only one member of the council, and the other members of the council didn't necessarily share my vision for how we wanted to approach that. But I'm still very grateful for having this chance to see the light at the end of the tunnel now, where everybody in Orem within a few years will have access to the fastest internet in the country at what I believe are very competitive rates as well. One of the things that I think, and really I think the staff deserves most of the credit for this, one of the things that the city has done a much better job with over the last few years is master planning. And by that I mean proactively working with the public to set a vision of, this is what we expect State Street to look like. This is what we expect the Aspen neighborhood to look like. And as we work on these corridor plans, the transportation master plan, on the neighborhood plans, I've loved seeing that intense ownership that our residents experience as they have an opportunity to participate in that process and really set a vision for this is what we want our neighborhood to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And as we cycle through each of those neighborhoods and once we finish, we'll start back at the beginning and then we'll go back and update and revise that plan. And I'm curious, because this will be the first cycle back through again, I'm curious to see how much has changed in the 5 or so years since some of those neighborhood plans started. But I think as a city council person, it really helps to have that proactive vision to go into a city council meeting when you're asked to vote on a zoning issue or an exception to some city code. It's helpful to have that context of this is what the neighborhood collectively agreed to. This is our vision for this neighborhood, as opposed to being in reactive mode where you're only presented with what information is on the agenda or spoken about in the meeting. Because honestly, sometimes at the city council meeting, you might have 3 or 4 people show up and they might have the same concern, they might have different concerns, but you're kind of getting one slice of that neighborhood, and those 3 or 4 voices, while they're important, might not necessarily reflect the overall vision or opinions of the rest of the neighborhood. And so I think having that baseline and that overarching vision of what the neighborhood is about, I think that's really helpful to us as a city council. And I think as well, as we work with businesses that are either here in Orem, thinking about redeveloping or expanding, or maybe even thinking about relocating to Orem, I think it helps us work with them so that they understand this is what this corridor, this neighborhood is all about, and they can understand how their business opportunity might coincide or might conflict in some cases with how we expect that neighborhood or that area to develop over time. One other thing that I wanted to mention, and this has been a bit of a touchy subject over the last few months, but I think it's an important conversation that we needed to start. One of the challenges we have in Orem is our budget is so dependent on sales tax, and that's in part because we have such a strong retail base here, which is a good thing. It helps keep our property taxes low, but it can also potentially leave us vulnerable in situations like we had a decade ago with the Great Recession, where as the economy starts to drop and disposable income is no longer as available, it makes that retail sector, it makes them very vulnerable to those economic pressures. And so as a city, it also leaves balancing our budget very vulnerable as well. And so as we've talked about some of the needs we have, one of those being our police department, and I'm not sure you would say that we're short-staffed, but it's become increasingly challenging to respond to the number of calls that are coming in because we don't have an appropriate level of staffing with the number of officers that we have on patrol. And so one of the priorities that I had this year was to try to correct that a little bit, and I don't think we're necessarily going to fix it this year, but I think we're taking an important step in the right direction with the proposal we have to hire 4 additional police officers. And to do that, it will involve a small property tax increase. Now, I want to try to do everything I can to keep property taxes low, but I also want to make sure that we have a sustainable approach going forward, where if the economy were to fall again, then we're not leaving ourselves exposed that, we can't fund our police department anymore. And so that tax proposal, it would increase the monthly property tax for the median household in Orem by about $1 a month. And so obviously not something that we like to do, but I think this will help us have a much more balanced and sustainable approach going forward so that we can continue balancing the budget while providing essential city services. So I believe that education is really the cornerstone to our economic development in this valley. And as a city council member, I'm not necessarily claiming that I'm going to revolutionize or improve education necessarily, but I just wanted to highlight the great partnership that we have with Alpine School District and with Utah Valley University. I think we're fortunate to have those relationships, and I think that speaks to how well our economy here is thriving. And we frequently make top 10 lists of the best economies, the best job markets, and things like that. And I think a lot of that, it really stems from the education systems that we have available here. I also want to talk about infrastructure, and that can mean things like utility infrastructure, roadways, connectivity, things like Utopia. I think as we create that environment where businesses realize that, hey, we're going to have the resources that we need to thrive in this valley, and our people are going to be able to get to work, whether that's by public transit with the UVX line or with roads that are well maintained. I'm actually encouraged that we have some additional funding available now to address some of the road needs, and we can be more proactive, because if we let our roads go too long, it becomes so much more expensive if we have to rebuild those roads from scratch, as opposed to just doing proactive maintenance along the way. And then also the quality of life that we love here in Orem. I think that's really a big part of why so many employers love to set up shop here, because employees love to have access to our amazing parks. We've got the Altogether Playground, we've got the Splash Pad, the Dog Park, the Bike Skills Park, we're renovating our fitness center, and we also have a strong commitment to the cultural arts, things like the Sarah and the Hale Center Theater, and the new library hall that we're excited about here at the City Center. And as we invest in those aspects of education, infrastructure, and quality of life, that really makes an impact in making Orem an attractive place to do business. So first of all, thank you so much for doing your homework and researching who's running in this election. I'm actually really excited about the field of candidates we have this year. I think sometimes in years past people might have felt like it was more of a good versus evil competition, and I think this year it's going to be much more of a good, better, best situation. And so I'm excited that we have so many willing, competent people willing to serve their city, and I think it's going to be a great election year. And just speaking to local elections in particular, one of the things that I've really embraced over the last decade or so is the idea of how much local government and civic activity really benefits us at that local level. I certainly would never discourage somebody from voting in any election, but when you think about, where does your vote really matter most? If I vote for this presidential candidate versus this presidential candidate, chances are my vote is not going to sway that election. Now again, please vote. I'm not trying to discourage you from doing that. But when you think about, well, how does my vote impact my daily life or my neighborhood or my community in these local elections, we had a situation last year on the Prop 5 vote where after election night, I think it came down to a single vote was the determining factor. Now, as more ballots came in and more votes were counted, that gap spread quite a bit. But it was just a reminder of how meaningful voting in these local elections really is. And so again, thank you for doing your homework. I encourage you to reach out. Any questions you have that I haven't answered on my website or in these videos, feel free to call, text, email, Facebook, however you prefer to reach out to us. I'm here to talk. And I kind of joke, my daughter probably wishes I would sing this, but there's a phrase from one of her Disney princess heroes that I want to be where the people are. And so sometimes that means I'm diving into Facebook threads on the city's Facebook page to answer questions, and I want to hear what those concerns are. I want to have an understanding of why you have those concerns, and if there are solutions that we can come up with to win-win scenarios where we can find a better way of doing things. I'm all ears. So thank you so much for your consideration, and I hope you'll consider me for one of your 3 votes this year.